No Time to Die. Yes, it is finally here. The first major film that was pushed back due to the pandemic is finally here. This film was supposed to come out a year and a half ago? It is finally here. We have James Bond. He is finally back. James Bond has left active service. His peace is short-lived when Felix Leiter, an old friend from the CIA, turns up asking for help, leading Bond onto the trail of a mysterious villain armed with a new dangerous weapon. I was so excited for this film. I'm a huge James Bond fan. I'm a huge Daniel Craig James Bond fan. Even though I've only loved half of his films, like Skyfall and Casino Royale are brilliant, and then Spectre is sort of whatever, I guess, and then we're not even going to talk about Solace. Please don't make me do that. And as you know, this is Daniel Craig's last film as James Bond. And also, as I said before, this was the first major film to be pushed back due to the pandemic. So there's a lot of anticipation going into this film. And was the wait worth it? I'm happy to say that No Time to Die was a blast. I had a great time with this film. I don't think it's nearly as good as Casino Royale or Skyfall, but I do think it's a lot better than Spectre and way better than Solace. This film was just refreshing. It felt great to have a good James Bond film back on screen. And I think a lot of the reasons I enjoyed this film was the script. I think there's a great mystery throughout this film that keeps you constantly engaged. It's something I feel like was missing from Spectre because both films feel somewhat similar. This feels like Spectre Part 2, but they fixed all the things that were wrong with Spectre. Well, most things. I'll get into that in a second. Like, this film has lots of action, but it doesn't have as much action as you would think in a movie that's nearly 3 hours long. Yes, this is a very long film, but I was still constantly engaged and invested throughout this whole mystery. It's a well-written mystery because a lot of scenes in this film are characters just one-on-one talking to each other, but you're engaged and invested with the mystery and the story, and that has to do with the well-written script. And we'll talk about the action now, because there is a lot of action in this film. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say there's no action in this film. There is a lot of action in No Time to Die. I'm just saying, in a movie that's nearly 3 hours long, it's James Bond, you'd think there'd be more. And this isn't a dock on my rating at all. I think a film that's nearly 3 hours long but doesn't feel like it's runtime at all, and they don't rely on a bunch of action to make that happen, is actually a huge compliment. But let's talk about the action now, because there are some sequences I thought were great. A lot of wide shots, a lot of in-camera work. You could tell it's all practical, a lot of really cool stunts. I think they did a great job with a lot of the action sequences in this film. But I'll be honest with you guys, I mean, there were some action sequences in this film I was disappointed with because I was expecting really great things, and they used a lot of shaky cam and things like that. Like, I don't get why we use shaky cam. It's never really been great. I mean, the only person that's done it well that I can think on the top of my head is Paul Greengrass, like the Bourne movies. Everything else, like, get rid of shaky cam. Come on, guys, let's be done with shaky cam. But overall, I still thought the action was really well done here. I just don't think it was executed as well as Casino Royale or Skyfall, because those films have, like, a few really memorable sequences. And here, I feel like there's one that I will really remember, like one sequence that was just really well done in one shot, and Bond's just fucking people up. It was awesome. And let's talk about Bond now. Let's talk about Daniel Craig as Bond. He does a great job here. There's a lot of damage to this character, obviously. That's why I love these Daniel Craig films. They show that Bond is a damaged, vulnerable person. They show it a lot in this film. I think they do a really great job with this character, and he gives a great performance. A great final performance of this franchise. Daniel Craig, take a bow. You deserve it. You are personally my favorite James Bond ever. And with this being Daniel Craig's last James Bond film, this film is very self-aware of that. It feels like a finale to Daniel Craig's saga. There's a lot of old characters that come back, like Felix. There's a lot of Easter eggs to other movies. There's a lot of Easter eggs to older movies that Daniel Craig isn't in. This film is very self-aware that it's a finale in some ways, and I think it really works for this film. And I think they do a great job sending off Daniel Craig. Like, it was very emotional at some points, and I didn't expect that. I think they did a great job with all that. But like I said before, this isn't as good as Casino Royale, which I think is perfect. It's not as good as Skyfall, which I think is nearly perfect. So I have some issues with this film. I said before that this film does a good job with its mystery, giving us information, keeping us engaged with what's going on. But there's so much information that they have to give us that sometimes it's not always perfect. Sometimes the film has problems giving us information because there is so much of it. So some of the scenes feel like exposition dumps, and it doesn't feel as organic as other scenes when they're giving us information. That's one of the issues I had with Spectre as well. I do think this film does a lot better job of giving us information and keeping us interested than Spectre does, but sometimes it falls into the same tropes. Also, Rami Malek's villain. I'm not saying he's a bad villain, and I don't think his performance was bad by any means. I thought he was really great as this villain. He should be in it more, though. He's not really in the film as much as you would think. He doesn't have too much screen time, which that's probably because they want to focus it more on Bond since this is Daniel Craig's last film. I totally get that. But I thought Rami Malek was great as this villain, and I wish he was in it a little bit more. But he's not a perfect villain because sometimes he has motivations that aren't really clear. Like the first half or the first 2/3 of this film, it feels like his motivations were completely clear and you understand what he was doing. In the last third, I didn't really understand what he was trying to do. Some things I understood, but not everything. But honestly, that's it. And I really don't care about my issues too much because I just had a blast with this film. I grew up with Daniel Craig as James Bond. I grew up with his films, and it was just great to see a satisfying ending to his era. No Time to Die was a satisfying conclusion to the Daniel Craig James Bond era. The movie's nearly 3 hours, but does not feel its runtime, and that has to do with some pretty great action sequences and a well-written mystery that keeps you constantly engaged. It's a well-written film that keeps you constantly engaged with the story and the characters, and Daniel Craig gives a great performance as his last role as James Bond. I do have some minor issues with the film. Not all the action sequences work because some of them use way too much shaky cam. I think the film does a good job of keeping us engaged with its mystery, but sometimes there's so much information that needs to be given to us that some scenes feel like exposition dumps. I thought Rami Malek gave a great performance as his villain. I just wish he was in the movie a little bit more. In the first 2/3, his motivations are pretty clear, but the last third of the movie, they become a little unclear and somewhat wacky in a way. But overall, I thought it was a satisfying and emotional conclusion and farewell to Daniel Craig as James Bond, which is my favorite era of James Bond films. I'll give No Time to Die 8 Davy Daves. It's crazy to think that Daniel Craig has been James Bond for 15 years. Think about that. That's insane. Casino Royale came out in 2006. Take a bow, Daniel Craig. You deserve it. I'm really curious to see who's going to be the next James Bond. That's a different video and that's a different question. But right now, let's celebrate Daniel Craig. He killed it for the last 15 years. So, No Time to Die. Let me know what you guys thought. If you've seen it, I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more Dave's Takes.